a woman with a clipboard marched confidently toward Clarence and demanded that he move his boat, assuming she was in charge. What she didn't know was that Clarence owned the entire lake, and the days of her fishing club were numbered. It was just past 7 a.m. when Clarence backed his truck into the gravel lot at Mayfield Lake. The morning was calm and quiet, and he had spent the previous night preparing his old aluminum fishing boat. This lake, where his father once brought him, held special meaning. As he was unhitching the trailer, he heard footsteps crunching toward him. A woman in her 50s with short blonde hair and a forced smile ordered him to leave, claiming he wasn't authorized to be there. She said she was on the HOA board and that the lake was private property reserved for their community. Clarence stayed calm. "Good morning," he replied. "Do you live here?" She repeated her authority and insisted he wasn't on the approved list. Clarence reminded her he had fished here many times without issue. When she threatened to call enforcement, he simply asked her to double-check who owned the lake. She scoffed, until Clarence calmly revealed that he was the sole trustee of Crescent Holdings, the private trust that had purchased the lake 3 years ago and had allowed conditional access to the community fishing club. That agreement hadn't been renewed in nearly a year. Despite this, she persisted, bringing back a security guard to confront him on the water. Clarence remained composed, questioning their authority. The young guard faltered as Clarence explained the legal ownership and even pointed to publicly filed documents verifying it. Teresa was furious, not just because of the boat, but because she was losing control. Clarence knew this wasn't about rules, but about entitlement and assumptions. She had never asked who he was, only assumed he didn't belong. Later, at home, Clarence pulled out the original deed, remembering his father's belief that nature should be shared with respect. But the new community hadn't tried to know him. Instead, they acted like gatekeepers, and now the kindness extended to them had been mistaken for weakness. Clarence wasn't angry, just resolved. He called a contact to review the HOA agreement, ready to set boundaries. The next day, he went to the county records office to confirm ownership in black and white. The lake, the dock, the surrounding land, all his. Back in his truck, Clarence wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about dignity. What Teresa had done wasn't just rudeness. It was a declaration that, in her mind, he didn't belong. And that was something Clarence could no longer ignore. Clarence sent a formal letter to the HOA revoking lake access due to an expired agreement. No threats, just facts. Signed, notarized, and backed by documents. He hand-delivered it to the HOA office, asking only that Teresa receive it. That evening, sitting on his porch with Jasper at his feet, Clarence finally felt peace, until his phone rang. An unknown number. "Mr. Rucker, this is Ron Castle, acting president of the Mayfield Hills HOA. We received your letter. Maybe we can talk." "No need to escalate things," Clarence replied calmly. "There's nothing to escalate. The agreement wasn't renewed. I've simply restored the boundaries." Ron tried to reason with him, suggesting compromise. Clarence paused. "Let's see how people handle humility," he said, ending the call. What he didn't expect was the storm that followed. By Wednesday, neighbors were staring at him in public. Emails arrived, polite but edged with blame. Then came the calls, some anonymous, others from people who had ignored him for years. Whispered gossip followed. At the hardware store, a man introduced himself as Billy Waller. heard what happened. "Not all of us agree with Teresa," he said. Clarence thanked him, surprised by the support. Others quietly reached out. A kind note appeared in his mailbox. A woman waved at the gas station, but not everyone was friendly. An anonymous flyer appeared in his mailbox. Resident blocks lake access, retaliation, or power play. It accused him of using his authority to punish the community. That evening, Clarence walked Jasper down the gravel path to the lake. A couple fishing stared but said nothing. Back home, he watched the sunset, wondering why defending a boundary stirred such fury. The next morning, a young woman named Andrea Preston called. "I'm new on the HOA board," she said. "I want to apologize. Teresa doesn't speak for all of us." She hinted that some members wanted to renegotiate the agreement. Clarence replied, "I'm not interested in deals. I want respect." By Friday, the HOA office buzzed with tension. Copies of Clarence's letter had spread like wildfire at cookouts, online forums, and through whispers on neighborhood walks. The fishing club was outraged. Even HOA members were divided. During a heated board meeting, Teresa sat rigid at the head of the table. Ron sighed. Like it or not, Clarence acted within his rights. One member fumed, "So we just let him lock us out?" Andrea spoke up. "He wants respect, and after how he was treated last weekend, I don't think that's asking much." Teresa snapped, "Are you taking his side?" "I'm taking the side of the facts," Andrea said firmly. "We let the agreement lapse. That's on us." Back at the lake, Clarence took notes on damages the HOA had ignored: broken benches, trash, a vandalized fence, things they were supposed to maintain. Billy pulled up in his truck. "You sure you want to stir this hornet's nest?" Clarence didn't look up. "I'm not stirring anything, just stopping people from trampling through my land without asking." That afternoon, the HOA posted a notice: lake access suspended until renegotiation with Clarence. Residents were warned not to use the dock or green spaces without permission or face trespassing charges. The fallout was instant. People flooded forums with complaints. A rumor spread that Clarence was selling the lake to a developer. No one knew who started it. Later that evening, Andrea knocked on Clarence's porch. "Would you be willing to speak at the next meeting? Tell your side?" Clarence paused. "I'll come." But showing up was one thing. Facing a room full of angry neighbors was another. The community hall filled fast. People stood against the walls, even outside the doors. The HOA hadn't seen this kind of turnout in years. All eyes were on Clarence. He stood alone, wearing jeans and a plain shirt. No notes, just himself. "My father brought me to this lake when I was 10, he began. "Before this neighborhood even existed, we fished in the morning and cooked by the water in the afternoon." Clarence stood at the front of the community meeting. No notes, no podium, just a quiet man speaking from the heart. "This lake was my father's legacy. I learned to tie my first fishing knot here. When I bought it through a trust, I kept it open for free. All I asked for was respect." He paused. "But when someone tells you to leave your own land and threatens the police, it's not just about rules. It's about dignity." A hush fell over the room. Someone whispered. They didn't know who he was. Clarence continued, "This isn't about punishment. It's about responsibility. You used something that wasn't yours, forgot to care for it, and never thought about who made it possible." Teresa finally asked, "Why didn't you just come to us first?" You came to me first. Clipboard, threats, remember?" She had no reply. Then the discussion opened. People asked if he'd reconsider renewing the agreement if things were done right, respectfully. "I'll think about it," Clarence said. "But this isn't just land, it's personal." In the days that followed, something shifted. The angry whispers faded. Even Teresa, once confrontational, quietly stepped back. Clarence returned to the dock with tools and a paint bucket, not out of duty, but because it mattered to him and his father's memory. Andrea showed up to help, tools in hand. "We're working on a new agreement," she said. "No more threats, no more confusion, just respect and shared effort." Even Billy Waller brought his grandson to help clean. "It's a start," he said. By sunset, the dock looked like new. People began to understand it wasn't about power. It was about principle. Clarence wasn't seeking thanks. But when a stranger whispered, "The lake's lucky to have you," it meant something. 1 week later, Clarence stood alone at the water's edge. He wasn't fishing. He was just still. No yelling, no conflict, just peace. He carried the new agreement, now rewritten with clear rules and shared responsibilities. Not for control, not for an apology that never came, but to protect something fragile, something meaningful. At the HOA clubhouse, Clarence signed it. Andrea leaned in. "We'll do better," he replied. "That's what I'll hold you to." As he walked out, a teenage boy stopped him. "Thank you for fixing the dock," he said, holding a fishing rod too big for his head. Clarence smiled. "Take care of it." "We will, promise." And with that, Clarence felt something loosen inside, a peace not from victory, but from being understood. He thought of that first Saturday, of Teresa storming in with judgment. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't retaliated. He let truth and law speak for him. And in the end, that had been enough. Because respect isn't something you demand. You earn it, quietly, firmly, day by day, and sometimes by standing still. You make the loudest noise. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked before your name was even known, remember this: silence is not weakness, and dignity speaks louder than any argument.